At my parents' house, love always came with conditions, and somehow my children were always too expensive to love. I thought moving back home after my divorce would give us safety. Instead, it exposed every hidden crack in our family. If you've ever faced favoritism or betrayal, you'll understand. And if stories like this speak to you, stay with us. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Not So Perfect Family 365, where real family drama is told the way it really happens. The morning we hauled our lives back into my parents' split level, the air smelled like lemon cleaner and old arguments. My twins, Jack and Emma, 10 and trying so hard to be brave, toted boxes labeled in their blocky handwriting: books, Lego, soccer, secrets. I told them we were lucky. I told myself the same thing, because rehearsed gratitude is cheaper than rent. If stories like this hit home, stay with me, and if you want more raw, real family drama told exactly how it happens, tap like and subscribe to Not So Perfect Family 365. My mother opened the door before we rang. "Shoes off in the foyer," she said, already wiping an invisible footprint. My father hovered behind her like a shadow shaped into a man. "Just until you're back on your feet," he reminded me, the way he used to remind me to say thank you before I'd finished receiving anything. "I am on my feet," I said, and felt the lie push against my ribs. 12-hour shifts at the children's hospital will keep you upright. They also hollow you out. They had converted Dad's home office into a room for the twins, 2 narrow beds, a dresser, a single window that faced the neighbor's fence like a blank wall of disinterest. I took the guest room with the floral comforter that smells like dryer sheets in someone else's summer. We stacked our boxes carefully, as if neatness were rent we could afford. "You always were the responsible one," Mom said approvingly to the boxes instead of to me. Stephen was more big picture. Stephen is my younger brother, the golden child, the sun around which my parents orbit, while the rest of us learn the art of eclipse. He runs a tech business our parents once called his dream, and I called their investment. He lives across town in a house with vaulted ceilings and those faucets that look like sculptures. My children and I now live under a roof that isn't ours. At dinner, the first night, Dad asked about my schedule like he was doing math he meant to hold over me. 12 hours, nights. Sometimes, I said, pediatrics is short-staffed. Mom tutted, children need consistency. Stephen never liked being left with sitters. Stephen never had asthma, I said, looking at Jack, who was measuring his breaths like a secret he could control. Emma tapped her fork. "We can set our own alarms for school, Grandma. We're not babies." Mom smiled without her eyes. "No one said you were." After the dishes, I scrubbed the stove while Mom pretended not to notice. Dad wandered through the kitchen with his phone and a sigh. "David's sending support," he asked, the kind of question that isn't a question at all. "On paper," I answered, thinking of my ex-husband's new apartment with the minimalist couch and his temporary liquidity issues. He once told me a savings account was a mindset, which is something men say when their money lives under names that aren't yours. I don't know where all the dollars went: crypto, a second phone, a business trip that smelled like hotel soap and late apologies. What I know is that I picked up extra shifts and extra shame and told my kids we were a team. At the hospital, I am good at what I do. I know which cry means pain and which cry means fear. I know the steadying weight of a small hand finding yours in the dark, and the way parents try to bargain with the universe in a language made of breath and hope. I walk into rooms and promise we will do everything. Then I come home and try to make the same promise to my own children, on a budget of nerve and decency. "My room feels small," Emma said the second night, lying on the bed and staring at the ceiling like it could be talked into moving higher. "It's temporary," I said. "For how long?" she asked. I reached for the tone I use in triage: steady, warm, a little clinical so it won't crack. "Until we've saved enough. We'll make a chart, watch the numbers climb." Jack nodded like he could already see it, a ladder drawn in dry erase marker, rung by rung up to a door with our names on it. We settled into a routine built from other people's habits. Mom liked the dishwasher loaded, spoons facing down. Dad liked the TV loud and the thermostat low. We learned where to step so the hallway didn't creak. We learned that "just until you're back on your feet" sounds generous and feels like a debt you'll never finish paying. On Friday, Stephen came by with his wife, Melissa, who hugged my mother like the prodigal future they'd been waiting for. They brought artisanal cupcakes and an ultrasound picture from last year they still hadn't stopped using like a charm. "He's almost 8 months now," Melissa said, as if time were something only her child had figured out how to use properly. "Ethan is advanced," my mother announced, beaming. "He's already pulling himself up." Stephen was the same way, so coordinated. Emma glanced at me, then at her twin. Jack pressed his lips together, which is what he does when he is making himself smaller. After they left, Mom stood at the dining table, measuring with her eyes. "We could shift this closer to the window," she murmured. "Better flow." "For what?" I asked, rinsing plates. "Oh, nothing," she said in the sing-song voice of a woman making space for a future she has already decided you don't belong in. "Just thinking ahead." Saturday. The hospital ran long because a stomach bug had turned the ward into a chorus of pale faces and plastic basins. I drove home at dusk under a sky the color of a bruise fixing itself. I rehearsed the evening, homework, showers, a budget talk made into a game. We would draw the chart. We would make our ladder. I opened the front door and stopped. The formal dining room, the room Mom polishes like a shrine, had been rearranged. The table shoved toward the window. The runner straightened into a perfect line down the middle like a sermon. And at the head, where my father's chair usually sits, stood a brand new baby high chair. White, expensive, impossible to miss. A glossy thing with a padded seat and a tiny embroidered name on the strap cover, Ethan. "Surprise!" Mom called from the kitchen, her voice bright and brittle. "Isn't it wonderful for when the baby visits?" "But Stephen lives across town," I said, the words coming out soft and wrong, like I'd bitten my tongue. I looked at the high chair again, the way it claimed space, the way it sat exactly where Jack and Emma spread their homework 2 nights ago, and felt something small inside me go very, very still. Sunday morning arrived with the smell of cinnamon rolls and favoritism. My mother baked only when Stephen came over. The twins leaned on the counter, hoping, I think, that maybe Grandma had remembered they lived here too. "Don't touch, those are for later," Mom snapped as Emma reached for one. Then she softened. "Ethan loves cinnamon. It helps him teeth." Emma withdrew her hand like she'd been caught stealing. Jack muttered under his breath, "We like cinnamon too." I pretended not to hear because what else could I do? Fight for pastries. Stephen and Melissa arrived at noon, carrying Ethan like he was made of glass and gold. The house shifted immediately. My parents cooed, clapped, rearranged chairs. The twins were told to sit carefully to keep their voices down to let the baby nap. "Isn't he advanced?" Melissa asked as Ethan gurgled. "Already standing with support." "He's gifted," Mom agreed, as though she'd been waiting her whole life to hand down the title. "Just like Stephen was." The twins looked at me. I tried to smile. It felt like apologizing for something I hadn't done. That evening, when I came back from my shift, the dining room was different again. The china cabinet had been emptied of its porcelain guardians. In its place, a shiny playpen sprawled across the carpet, brand new, tags still dangling. "Mom, what's all this?" I asked, dropping my bag. She was on her knees, folding tiny blankets. "For Ethan, of course. He'll be here often now. Stephen and Melissa need a break." I blinked. "They have a 4-bedroom house." "They're renovating," she replied briskly, like that explained everything. "Besides, it's easier for them here. Family helps family, Amanda. Family helps family. Unless that family is mine." Later that night, as I tucked the twins into bed, Emma whispered, "Why does Grandma love Ethan more than us?" "She doesn't," I said automatically, smoothing her hair, but the words tasted like rust. "She bought him a chair and a pen," Jack pointed out. "She didn't buy us anything when we moved in." I swallowed hard. "It's different. Babies need more things." "Do they need more love too?" Emma asked, her eyes sharp. I had no answer. 2 weeks later, the evidence was undeniable. The house bloomed with baby gear, swings, Sonette, stacks of diapers in the hallway. My twins had been asked to move their art supplies into their bedroom, to make room. Their laughter was shushed more often than it was welcomed. At dinner one night, Dad said casually, "Stephen's business is expanding. 6 figures at 32, impressive, isn't it?" I stabbed at my food. "Good for him. You could learn a thing or two," he added, not looking at me. I set my fork down. "I'm a nurse, Dad. I save children's lives." He shrugged. "Stephen creates jobs." The silence after that stretched thin as glass. Emma shifted uncomfortably. Jack dropped his napkin. Mom changed the subject to Ethan's sleeping schedule. When Stephen announced that their house renovations had finally begun and they needed a place to stay, I already knew the verdict. My parents' faces lit up like Christmas. "Of course you'll stay here," Dad said, slapping Stephen's back. I raised my hand. "Wait, there are already 5 of us in this house. Space is..." Mom's eyes sliced into me. "Don't be selfish, Amanda. It's only temporary." "Only temporary." The words echoed in my chest. Just like our stay was supposed to be temporary. Just like every sacrifice we'd been asked to make. The following weekend, Stephen and Melissa moved in with their bags, their gadgets, their baby's throne of belongings. The twins' drawings were stripped from the refrigerator to make space for Ethan's daycare schedule. The television, once ours for an hour after homework, now looped Melissa's shows endlessly. That night, Emma pulled her blanket up to her chin. "Mom, is this still our home?" I sat on the edge of her bed, my throat tight. "It's a place we're staying." Jack turned on his side, clutching his stuffed dragon. "Then when do we get our own?" I smiled the way nurses do when they can't promise survival but can't bear to tell the truth. Soon, I whispered. We're climbing the ladder, just a few more rungs. What I didn't say, the ladder was getting steeper, and someone kept moving the top farther away. And then, one night I came home to find my twins' toys stacked in boxes by the hallway. A sticky note taped to the lid in my mother's careful script. Clutter, put away. I stared at it until the words blurred. For the first time, I wondered if the house wasn't shrinking at all. Maybe it was us, being pushed smaller and smaller until we no longer fit. In every house we've ever loved, the refrigerator became our bulletin board for being alive. Permission slips, pizza coupons we never used, spelling tests with shining stars, a crooked family photo where David blinked and the twins grinned like conspirators. Back then, Sunday mornings meant pancakes and watercolor fingerprints drying on junk mail. We taped the twins' paintings up while the skillet hissed and the coffee went dark and brave. The fridge said, "This is us." Messy, loud, together. Here, the fridge said, "Schedule, laminated blocks. Ethan nap 10:30. Ethan puree 12:00. Ethan tummy time." A grid of glossy photos, all the same baby, the same blessed light. My kids' drawings, Emma's soccer girl with thunder calves, Jack's fox made of origami shapes, were peeled away without ceremony. I found them curled in the recycling, the edges wet with someone else's coffee. I was reorganizing, Mom said when I held them up, soft as wilted leaves. We need important information front and center. Right, I said, because color and joy are not information. Mom's smile was paper thin. Don't be dramatic, Amanda. They're just pictures. We'll put them in a keepsake box. We don't have a box, Jack said quietly from the doorway. We'll get one, she said, as if that solved the hole appearing under my son's feet. December arrived with its mints and mistakes. When the tree went up, the ornaments told a story that skipped chapters. Emma's peppermint stick frame from 2nd grade stayed in the bin. Ethan got a new silver rattle hung dead center at toddler eye level. At the gift exchange, children unwrapped sweaters that still smelled like department store cardboard, while Ethan's mountain of boxes revealed a ride-on Audi, a stability tower, a cashmere baby blanket that cost more than my car payment. He won't remember any of this, I said to no one in particular. That's not the point, Dad replied, already assembling something with a tiny wrench. We can and we want to. We can, we want to. In our house, love had verbs. Here it had receipts. That night, after the twins fell asleep, I drew the savings ladder on my closet wall with a black marker, the same way I trace surgical consents with a pen so parents can see the path. Security deposit. First month's rent. Emergency cushion. I labeled each rung and put dates next to them because stories need deadlines or else they never find an ending. I stood back, thinking of overtime shifts like beads I could thread onto a string until the necklace reached our necks. David texted a photo of a sunset from a rooftop bar. Thinking of the kids. Will Venmo child support Friday, snafu with the brokerage, long story. The old ache arrived, patient as winter. The snafu once had a name I didn't know, an app on a second phone, a brokerage under a friend's LLC, my name missing the way a sonogram misses a face. I typed and erased 3 different replies before choosing the only one that lets you sleep. Friday is fine. The kids are good. They were good. They needed dough with me for cinnamon rolls we would bake on the morning the grandparents baked theirs for Stephen. We made ours small and imperfect and ate them warm at the counter, huddled like campers around a candle. At the pediatric ward, I taped a construction paper snowman to the whiteboard of a room where a boy with leukemia practiced being brave. When I returned to the nurse's station, Nancy slid a coffee toward me. You look like you're doing math in your head, she said. Just drawing ladders, I said. Climb them, she replied. Don't apologize for wanting out. On a Tuesday that felt like Wednesday, Emma came home buzzing. Coach says I'm quick, Mom. He says I see the field. Her cheeks were December bright. That's because you do, I said, kissing her hairline. You always have. I looked over at Jack, who was hunched at the table, shading a fox with graphite that made it look like smoke and puzzle pieces at the same time. He didn't look up, but his mouth softened. After dinner, I found my kids standing at the fridge again, hands empty, faces reflective in the stainless steel. Their reflections didn't look like children, they looked like ghosts politely waiting their turn. Let's make our own wall, I said. We taped butcher paper to their bedroom door. Emma wrote goals across the top in a swoop that would make a sign painter jealous. Jack drew a ladder with 9 rungs and labeled the top, front door with a key. They grinned at each other like maybe the world was a team sport after all. By January, the house pulsed to Ethan's rhythm. My kids learned to breathe in the spaces. They laughed quietly. They put headphones on joy. When Stephen and Melissa came in late to Sunday dinner, no apology, Ethan asleep on Stephen's shoulder like a trophy, The roast was cold and nobody minded. My parents were busy being grandparents the way you are busy when you finally get the thing you ordered years ago. Then, on a rainy Thursday, Jack came home with a crumpled letter he'd kept in his pocket all day like treasure. "Mom," he said, trying not to be breathless, "my fox got picked. For the district art exhibit. MS. Alvarez says they only chose 3 from each grade. She says mine looks like it's thinking." I held the letter like it could burn me and warm me both. "Of course it looks like it's thinking," I told him. "It was drawn by a boy who does." He nodded, small and important, and floated into the kitchen, where Mom was at the table with a stack of fabric swatches. "Grandma," he said, laying the letter down so carefully the paper barely made a sound, "guess what?" Mom didn't glance up. "Later, Jack. I'm helping Melissa choose the curtains for the baby's room." The kitchen table was a stage that Sunday, Stephen at the head like he'd been born chairman, Melissa rocking Ethan on her knee, my parents leaning in, hanging on every word. I came home from a 12-hour shift and walked into a meeting that had started without me. "We've got some exciting news," Stephen announced, flashing the smile that once got him out of speeding tickets and apparently adulthood. "The renovations are finally happening. Full remodel. Walls down. New foundation work, the whole deal." Mom clapped like a woman at a graduation ceremony. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Melissa leaned forward. "But we'll need a place to stay, 6, maybe 8 weeks, just until it's finished." Dad didn't hesitate. "Of course you'll stay here, we've got plenty of room." I stood frozen in the doorway. "Actually, we're already a little cramped. 5 people under this roof." Mom shot me the look that used to silence me at 12. "Family helps family, Amanda. It's only temporary. Temporary, like our stay was supposed to be, like every sacrifice we made." By the weekend, their bags were in the guest room, their crib in the corner, their stroller in the hall. Ethan's toys colonized the living room floor like a cheerful invasion. My twins' art supplies, stacked neatly in a basket, were shoved upstairs. "Clutter," Mom explained, tucking rattles into bins as if cleaning up a war zone. The refrigerator, once already claimed, now wore Ethan's daycare menu in neon colors, taped directly over the twins' savings ladder I'd stuck there for motivation. Jack stared at the paper, his lips moving like he was calculating whether we'd lost ground. Emma whispered that night, "If this is temporary, why does it feel permanent?" Rules shifted overnight. No running in the yard, Ethan might be startled. No clarinet practice after school, Melissa had calls. No snacks outside of approved options, Melissa didn't want unhealthy smells lingering near Ethan's nursery. Emma's jaw tightened when she heard that one. "It's our house too." "No," I whispered, pulling her close. "It's their house for now." She looked up at me with those fierce eyes that see more than a mother wants them to. "Then when do we get one?" At dinner, Dad filled plates high with Melissa's favorites. The twins picked at food they didn't like, while Ethan banged a spoon against his plate and sent peas flying. Laughter all around. "He's exploring his world," Melissa said indulgently. Later, when Jack asked quietly if he could have a sandwich instead, Mom's voice cracked like a whip. "Ungrateful children eat what's put in front of them." I watched my son's face fall, watched him swallow the words that might have saved him. That night, I tried reason. "Mom, Dad, this isn't working. The kids feel invisible." "They're oversensitive," Dad replied. "Babies need more attention. Yours are old enough to adapt." I clenched my hands to keep them still. "They've already adapted to divorce, to moving here, to me working nights. How much more do you want from them?" Mom's eyes flashed. "You always were jealous of your brother. I thought you'd outgrow it." Her words hit like a fist, not a nurse, not a mother, just the jealous sister again. When I crawled into bed that night, I could still hear the twins whispering in their shared room. Emma's voice fierce, "It's not fair." Jack's voice tired, "We just have to wait." And I thought, wait for what? For space to shrink even more? For my kids to disappear entirely under someone else's definition of family? The next morning, I walked into the dining room and saw the crib standing where our ladder had once been drawn on the fridge. I pressed my palm against the cold metal bars. And that was when I knew, this house wasn't ours anymore. It was his. The only question left was how long I would keep pretending otherwise. If you listened closely, you could hear the house rewrite itself. New rules slotted into place like magnets, click, 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 until the old ones had nowhere to live. No jumping rope in the yard because the baby's nap runs late. No clarinet after school because Melissa has a call. No soccer cleats on the mud tray because they smell, though Ethan's stroller dripped milk across the foyer without comment. "Let's make a schedule," I told Melissa one Tuesday, trying so hard to sound collaborative I could taste the effort. "Emma's band teacher has a virtual practice at 4:30. It's 15 minutes. If we put a whiteboard up, we can. I have standing client meetings every afternoon," she said, thumbs flying across her phone. "And babies don't keep schedules. Emma can practice her little hobby at night." "Hobby?" Emma repeated later, twisting the reed in her fingers. Coach says clarinet's not a hobby if you learn to make the room quiet around it. She's right, I said, even as I calculated the math of our days. My shifts, their naps, my parents' moods. Somewhere in there, my children were supposed to unfold. That night, Emma set the clarinet back in its case like she was tucking in a friend whose feelings had been hurt. In the hallway, Dad glanced at the clock. Good, quiet hours, he said, as if the house had a posted ordinance that applied only to us. At work, I ran on caffeine and certainty. A toddler with RSV needed enrollment for. A mom with a paper-thin voice needed someone to translate the medical into human. I was good there. In those rooms, I knew which words to say and which ones to hold. I charted vitals, charted progress, charted hope. At home, the chart on our door, the savings ladder, had 2 new rungs shaded in. I'd picked up an extra overnight, shuffled the budget, untangled a mistake that wasn't mine. David's support had not arrived Friday because it was locked in settlement, which is what he wrote when what he meant was I moved it. Last year, I learned our life had come with a side account I never saw and a card I never swiped. Once, after he'd had 2 bourbons and a silence, he called it liquidity. I call it disappearing. Everything okay? Emma asked when she found me reworking numbers at midnight. Everything is numbers, I said. We're winning. She looked unconvinced. She's 10. She can smell when adults talk strategy to avoid saying surrender. Wednesday, MS. Alvarez emailed. Jack's work is thoughtful as ever, but he's quieter, hanging back. He asked to switch seats to the corner. Is everything okay at home? The words fuzzed at the edges. Jack, who narrates movies under his breath because he likes to warn the hero about trouble, now wanted the corner because corners don't ask anything of you. Buddy, I said gently, finding him in the office stern bedroom, sketchbook open to a fox with a new shadow. I can't get loud here, he said without looking up. I don't want to be the noise that makes everyone mad. You're not noise, I said. You're the point. He shrugged, which is how boys say I love you but I don't believe you yet. Friday dinner was a parade for a guest of honor who couldn't hold his own spoon. Chicken Alfredo because Melissa liked it, garlic bread because Stephen did, salad because my mother liked to pretend she was balancing indulgence with virtue. Ethan threw a fistful of pasta on the floor and everyone laughed like confetti had fallen. He's exploring his world, Melissa beamed. Jack carefully, quietly. Could I have a sandwich? Mom's eyebrows lifted like a drawbridge closing. When I was young, we ate what was put in front of us. Jack's face did a thing I've seen on floors 3 and 4 of the hospital, the part where a child learns which rooms they are allowed to occupy. After the twins went up, I tried civility one last time. I'm asking for 15 minutes a day of clarinet, and no lectures when Jack asks for food that doesn't make him gag, that's all. Babies come first, said, your 2 have had you long enough. Long enough. My voice went calm and flat, the tone I use when a parent blames a fever on bad luck and not on missing antibiotics. They lost a home, a marriage, the shape of a week, and half their mother most nights. Mom's mouth turned thin. You always did dramatize, Amanda, and you've never gotten over the fact that your brother needs more from us because he aims higher. He asks for more, I corrected. There's a difference. She shook her head as if acknowledging the difference would collapse the whole house. That weekend, we went to the public library instead of the park because the library has rules that make sense. Whisper, share, return what you take. The twins did homework in the sunlit children's room while I researched rentals I couldn't quite afford. Nancy texted, everything okay, you looked like a person stapled to a smile. We're okay, I wrote, climbing. On the way home, the twins fell asleep in the back seat, their hands almost touching on the bench between them. I thought of the ladder again, then of rungs that move on you when you're not looking. At the house, the TV blared a show Melissa watches where everyone is beautiful and unhappy. My mother shushed me at the door. Baby's sleeping. My children are sleeping too, I whispered. They're older, she said, as if years worked like earplugs. I tucked the kids in and stood in the doorway. Emma's clarinet case leaned against the wall like a dog that always sits when it's told. Jack had drawn a fox on the butcher paper, this one with its eyes closed. Underneath, in careful print, door with a key, my phone pinged. Another email from MS Alvarez, I'm worried about Jack. I closed my eyes and pictured a fox finding a hole under a fence. If the gate won't open, you make one. When I opened them, I could hear footsteps downstairs. My father and Stephen, their voices low and practical as cash. I stood very still and listened, because listening is how you learn what you must do next. And that was when the plan I'd been sketching in pencil began to ink itself in. I didn't realize hope could sound like cardboard until I saw the box in the recycling, a high-chair advertisement smiling up from glossy paper, a price tag that made me blink, $399.99. I picked up the flap and it sliced my finger. The cut was thin and immediate, the kind that doesn't bleed until you look at it. Careful, Mom said from the counter, as if the problem were me and not the price of someone else's comfort. We want Ethan to be comfortable when he eats, she added, like she'd rehearsed it. Jack's inhaler was on the table, the pharmacy label yellow where Rain had kissed it in the parking lot. Insurance had rejected the brand he tolerates best. The copay on the generic was still high enough to feel like a dare. I held up the orange bottle. He needs to breathe. We're on a fixed income, Mom said, which is what she says when her money is for love, but my money is for mistakes. Stephen breezed in, kissed her cheek, didn't look at me. Contractor found a foundation issue, he announced. We might extend the stay, holidays, maybe January. Melissa's job went fully remote, she'll need quiet hours for calls. Dad clapped him on the back. Stay as long as you need. This is your home too. I thought of just until you're back on your feet, and how feet can turn to roots if you water them with enough denial. That night at the hospital, the monitors sang their electronic lullabies, and a mother slept in a chair with a blanket tucked under her chin. Nancy slid into the chair beside me during charting. I can tell you the moment a woman decides, she said, sipping her vending machine tea. Her jaw goes quiet. I touched my jaw and found stone. Where are you on your ladder? She asked. 2 rungs away, I said. Deposit and first month. I can make the numbers if David's payment lands Friday. If it doesn't, I make them anyway. I didn't say I sell the last jewelry gift that isn't a memory I need. I didn't say I stop eating lunch at work and pretend it's intermittent fasting. You and the kids can land in my guest room for the gap, Nancy said, like the logistics had already been solved. If it comes to that, it might. When I got home, the living room looked like a catalog page for a life I wasn't invited to live in. Melissa had arranged throw pillows in a color palette that didn't include childhood. The twins' markers were gone from the coffee table. A sticky note on the cabinet read, "Clutter donate." Jack found me staring. "Do we not live here?" he asked, testing the sentence for splinters. "We live," I said. "Houses are just places where we practice." He nodded like he was old. At dinner, Ethan banged the high chair tray with his palm. Everyone smiled like he'd told a joke only geniuses understand. My kids ate quietly, the way you eat when noise is currency and you're broke. After, I heard the voices again, Dad and Stephen in the garage, concrete cold under their words. "Basement's underused," Dad said. "If we clear space, it could fit 2 twin beds. Kids are resilient, they'll manage." "Tape measures hanging by the pegboard," Stephen replied. "We'll do it during Amanda's shift, less drama. Still as a photograph. There are moments in the hospital when you watch a monitor dip and you know, if you don't act, something will be lost that won't grow back. This felt like one of those. Upstairs, Emma polished her clarinet keys with a square of cloth, small circles, patient like ritual. "Tomorrow's the recorded assessment," she said. "MS, Grant says if I nail the chromatic run, I might move up a chair." "You will," I said, and believed it because I needed to. She set the clarinet down. "Do you hear them?" she asked, eyes on the door. "I hear them." Jack stood in the doorway, hand on the frame like he was bracing for a wave. "If they put us in the basement, will the ladder still work?" he asked. "Ladders work everywhere," I said. "Sometimes they become stairs." I didn't sleep so much as hold still in the shape of sleep. At 3, a message lit my phone. Support delayed, brokerage freeze, should clear Monday. Old Ake sat up and asked for water. By noon the next day, Dad was walking the basement with a tape measure, the metal tongue snapping back into its case like punctuation. Stephen pointed. Melissa from the top of the stairs said, "It'll be cozy," and honestly, older kids like dens. When I came up, my mother was pinning a swatch of fabric to a curtain rod, humming. "We'll move the twins' things after school," she said, like announcing a bake sale. "It just makes sense. The baby needs sunlight, teenagers don't." "They're 10, I said. She waved a hand. "Close enough." In the recycling, the high chair box winked at me again. A baby smiling at mush peas, a mother laughing with the right kind of teeth. I slipped the pharmacy receipt for Jack's inhaler into my pocket. 2 pieces of paper, 2 truths. 1 house, 2 standards. I took a breath, the kind I ask kids to take before a shot. Then I texted Nancy, "Is the guest room free tonight?" Her reply came back in a heartbeat, keys under the blue pot. "We'll leave the porch light on." Downstairs, the tape measure snapped open again. Upstairs, Emma's fingers ran a silent scale across empty air, and in the middle in my chest, something steady unlocked. I stood in the doorway to the kitchen, watched the clock tick toward after school. In 4 hours, I would be at the hospital until midnight. In 5, my father would start hauling boxes. And in 6, if I did nothing, my children would sleep underground. I looked at the ladder on the door. At the top rung labeled front door with a KEY, and understood. Sometimes you don't climb. Sometimes you jump. The text came while I was charting vitals on a child with pneumonia. "Jack first. Mom, something weird is happening. Grandpa and Uncle Stephen are moving our stuff." Then Emma, Grandma says we have to move to the basement. This is not fair. Another from Jack, frantic now. They took all our things downstairs. Finally Emma again, raw and simple. I hate it here. The basement is cold and gross and there are spiders. My hands shook as I shoved the phone back into my pocket. I told my charge nurse I had a family emergency. She read the look on my face and waved me out. Go, we'll cover. It still took an hour to hand off patients, longer than my heart could stand. The drive home was a blur of red lights and clenched teeth, every scenario darker than the one before. When I opened the door, Jack and Emma were on the couch, eyes rimmed red, bodies small in the cavern of upholstery. My mother and Melissa sat in the kitchen, drinking tea as if nothing had shifted. My father and Stephen were nowhere in sight. Emma bolted up and wrapped herself around me. They moved us downstairs. Grandpa said Ethan deserves the good rooms. My son's voice cracked. They said we should be grateful we even have space. I kissed their hair, my anger steady now, sharp enough to hold without spilling. Stay here, I whispered. Then I walked into the kitchen. Why are my children's things in the basement? My voice was calm, too calm. Melissa sipped her tea. We needed a nursery for Ethan, plus space for my office. It was the logical solution. Mom finally looked up. They're older, Amanda, they can adapt. Babies need the sunlight. The basement is damp, I said. It has mold. Jack has asthma. You're overreacting, Mom replied, eyes flat. We all made sacrifices raising kids. Family means compromise. Funny, I said, how compromise always looks like my children losing ground. The back door banged. Dad and Stephen walked in, dust on their shoes, tape measure hanging from Dad's pocket. Good, you're home, Dad said. We've made some adjustments. You mean you stole my kid's room? Stephen shrugged, shifting Ethan on his hip. We need the space. Kids are resilient. My hands curled into fists. Resilient doesn't mean disposable. Dad's jaw tightened. They should be grateful to have a roof at all. And that was it. The moment I saw him clearly, the man I had spent 35 years trying to please, the man who measured love in square footage and favoritism. I walked back into the living room where my children sat waiting, hope and fear braided across their faces. I smiled, genuine for the first time in months. Pack your bags. Jack blinked. Now, yes, I said. The things that matter. We'll come back for the rest later. From the kitchen came my father's growl. For God's sake, Amanda, no one is asking you to leave. I turned to him, my smile calm and lethal. You made it clear enough. My children deserve better than this house, better than this hierarchy, and I'm done pretending otherwise. Emma clutched her clarinet case, Jack grabbed his sketchbook and the stuffed dragon he'd slept with since he was 3. Their footsteps on the stairs sounded like freedom being born. Mom stormed in. This is nonsense. You can't just leave because things didn't go your way. This isn't about me, I said. It's about 2 children who have been told they don't deserve sunlight. Stephen scoffed. Where are you even going to go? You've got no money. I met his smirk with a truth he didn't see coming. I've been saving since the day I moved in. I signed a lease 3 weeks ago. We have a house waiting. The silence that followed was exquisite. Jack and Emma returned, backpacks strapped, faces set. We're ready, Mom, Emma said, her voice firm. Dad pointed a trembling finger at me. If you walk out that door, don't expect to be welcomed back. I looked at him one last time, sadness deeper than anger. I stopped expecting that a long time ago. Then we stepped into the night air, cooler than the house had been in months. I started the car. My mother ran to the window, desperate now. Amanda, please, come back inside. We'll talk tomorrow. I rolled the window down just enough. Tomorrow I'll be back, but only to collect the rest of our things. Jack and Emma didn't look back at the house as we drove away. Not with sorrow, not with longing, only relief. And I thought sometimes escape isn't running. Sometimes it's walking out steady, children at your side, into a night that finally belongs to you. Nancy opened her door like she'd been waiting at a finish line with water and a blanket. Shoes anywhere, hearts on the couch, she said, pulling us into the warm, lemon sage air of somebody else's piece. The guest room was already made. Clean sheets, a queen for me, an air mattress sidecar for the twins, 2 new toothbrushes still in their wrappers like a promise no one had to earn. Emma pressed her palms to the window. It smells like nothing, she said, surprised, like quiet. Like ours, Jack added, and that word, ours, unhooked something behind my ribs. We ate grilled cheese at the island, the kind with real butter that makes the pan talk. Nancy slid a plate to Emma, then to Jack, then to me. I'm proud of you, she said, one nurse to another. It takes guts to stop drowning politely. I should have done it sooner, I said. You did it when your hands were steady enough to carry them, she replied, chin tipping toward the twins. After showers, the kids burrowed into their beds and fell asleep so fast it felt like a magic trick. Nancy handed me a mug of tea and a pair of cotton pajamas with tiny moons. You'll need your strength, she said. Drink, sleep. Let me hate your family on your behalf for 12 hours. My phone blinked on the nightstand, bright and insistent. I turned it over face down. It still buzzed like a trapped hornet. Mom, first, come home. We can talk in the morning. You scared the children. Then Dad, we gave you a roof for 2 years. This is your thanks, immature. A follow-up, do not come back tonight. We need time to cool down. Stephen, efficient as an invoice. Utilities for the last quarter attached. We can settle when you return the house key. A PDF bloomed onto my screen, line items for things I'd bought and cooked and cleaned, a petty ledger written in someone else's font. Nancy watched my face change. Ah, she said, the guilt parade. Classic route, anger, accusation, amnesia. Amnesia. They forget the parts where you paid the price of admission. I scrolled. Melissa, as a mother. I'm shocked you'd move them in the night. Not safe. The irony could have lit the room. Then a photo from Mom, Ethan in his high chair at the head of the table, a fabricated caption, missing you all, like she could gaslight the furniture. I set the phone down. They're better writers than I remembered, I said. Block the theater for one night, Nancy said. If they need you in a real emergency, they'll find fire and smoke. She tucked a spare blanket around my shoulders. The kind of casual kindness I wanted my kids to grow up believing was normal. We sat and didn't talk for a while. The house hummed like houses do when people inside them aren't afraid. When I finally slept, it was the unglamorous kind. Jaw slack, dreams blank. I woke before dawn to the sound of Emma breathing the way you breathe when you're not listening for someone else's footsteps. Jack had one hand on his dragon and one on the air mattress valve, like he'd fallen asleep mid-engineering project. In the first blue light, I wrote a list in the Notes app: keys, birth certificates, health records, clarinet, sketchbooks, clothes, chargers, toothbrushes. I added photos and then deleted it because the photos on my parents' walls had never told our story anyway. By 8, my phone began again. Mom, we're having brunch. You and the kids should be here. Family works things out together. Then, I can forgive last night if you apologize to your father. He's hurt. Dad, you embarrassed us in front of Stephen. Enough with the dramatics. A voice memo this time. Breath heavy, the word grateful doing more work than oxygen. I typed one thing back. We'll come by at 10 to collect our things. Please have the twins' belongings ready. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared. We'll see, Mom wrote. Your brother is putting Ethan down for a nap at 10. Nancy read over my shoulder and huffed. Woman, the national anthem would not interrupt Ethan's naps, but you will, she muttered. Go later if that's safer for your blood pressure. 10 is best, I said before my shift. Then I'm driving, she said, and I didn't argue. In the car, Emma watched the neighborhoods change, porch swings becoming brick stairs, becoming trimmed hedges, and said, Are we in trouble? No, I said, we're in motion. Jack kneaded the dragon's tail. Are they going to be mad forever? People who like control don't forgive quickly, I said. But we're not asking for forgiveness. We're asking for respect. He nodded like he was cataloging a new species. Respect, family, rare in certain climates. We pulled into the cul-de-sac. My parents' house looked exactly the same and somehow smaller, as if our leaving had shrunk it to scale. Aunt Susan's car was there, parked half a driveway up like she'd gotten out before second thoughts could stop her. She met us at the walk with a grocery bag full of bubble wrap. Thought you'd need this, she whispered, fierce and kind. And she lowered her voice, be careful. Your father was, she searched for the word. Rearranging papers last night. Papers? I asked. Jack and Emma's birth certificates, passports, he said for safekeeping. She rolled her eyes. As if the safest place for your children's identities is under lock and key in his den. My stomach pulled tight. Documents. I added it to the list and underlined it twice. Inside, the temperature was 3 degrees colder and 20 years older. Mom sat at the table with a mug she only used when she wanted to look reflective. Stephen wasn't in sight. Dad stood by the hallway like a sentry who'd seen battle. He gestured toward the stairs. Their things are in the basement. We didn't want to clutter the hall. No, I said, my voice metacom. Their things were upstairs. You moved them without consent. We'll be packing from their room. Mom's eyebrows arched. Consent? This isn't a hospital, Amanda. I wish it were, I said, walking past her. Hospitals have rules about harm. Upstairs, the twins moved like small professionals, drawers, bags, checklists. Emma knelt by her music stand and tucked sheet music into a folder with a name I'd written in Sharpie the day she joined band, Emma Harris. Jack zipped his sketchbooks and paused at the butcher paper ladder we'd taped to the bedroom door. He left it there, a flag we didn't owe them. Downstairs, Aunt Susan intercepted me at the den. He locked the filing cabinet, she murmured. But your father isn't a complicated man. She pointed to a dish on the bookshelf, pebbles from old vacations. Underneath, a key. The cabinet squeaked open, dusty and self-important. Insurance, warranties, the deeds to my parents' mistakes. Then, 2 slim folders labeled in my mother's careful script, Jack and Emma. I slid them into my tote. Dad cleared his throat in the doorway. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, eyes on my bag. "Taking my children's documents," I said. "They belong with me." "They're safer here," he said. "Safer from what?" I asked. "Their mother," he blustered. "You've always been impulsive." "It took me 2 years," I said. "That's not impulsive, that's battered patience." He flinched at the word. Good, let language do some work back. In the kitchen, Mom hovered with a Ziploc full of cookies like she could bribe the ending. "You'll come Sunday?" she asked. "For dinner?" "Maybe." I said, "if the rules are the same for every child at the table." Her face pinched. "You'd punish us by keeping the twins away." "I'd protect them by keeping them out of places that hurt," I said. "If that's punishment, you named it." We carried bags to the car. Nancy packed the trunk like Tetris with empathy. Emma clutched her clarinet. Jack held both the dragon and the fox he'd cut out of cardstock, the one with thinking eyes. "Wait," Mom said at the curb, softer suddenly. "It didn't look like this in my head." "I know," I said. "That's why I stopped living in your head." For a second, I thought she might say I'm sorry and mean it. Then Ethan cried upstairs and the spell broke. Back at Nancy's, the house sighed us in. We stacked boxes in the hallway like a skyline, each tower labeled with Sharpie, books, shoes, school, winter. Nancy ordered pizza. Emma practiced the chromatic run twice. Jack sketched the shape of our new room, labeling the window breathing. For the first time in months, the noise we made belonged to us. My phone dinged with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it, a careful voice introduced itself. "Hi, Amanda. This is Kelly from HR at the hospital. We received a call this morning about you leaving your shift early yesterday. I know you had coverage, but I do need to touch base. Please call me back when you can." I stared at the phone, the slice of quiet in the room suddenly tilted. Nancy looked up from the pizza boxes. "What's wrong?" "Someone complained to HR," I said. "Anonymous." Emma stopped mid-scale. Jack's pencil paused. "Let me guess," Nancy said, voice flat and certain. "A concerned family member." I pressed the phone to my chest and counted my breath like I asked my patients to do. In, hold out. The room steadied. The ladder on the door in my mind did not disappear, it just leaned against a new wall. "Okay," I said to nobody and to everyone. "Okay." The voicemail ended with a callback number and the kind of pause that knows it is about to be filled. Nancy's guest room was too small for all the noise in my head. The twins fell asleep fast. Exhaustion has no conscience. But I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, listening for footsteps that couldn't reach us here. Every buzz from my phone made my shoulders flinch. At 1:07 a.m., another text from Mom. "We're worried about the children. Bring them home. They'll have their rooms back if it will calm you down." The lie in that last line burned hotter than honesty ever could. I didn't reply. At 1:14, "Dad, we've contacted the hospital about your behavior. You're unstable right now, Amanda. Maybe a break from work would help you get perspective." So it was them, reporting me. Not just gossip in the cul-de-sac, but a weapon swung where it could cut deepest. My work, my license, my paycheck. The very thing they insisted I couldn't manage without them. I turned the phone face down. My jaw locked so tight it hurt. I thought about waking Nancy, about spilling the bile of it all across her calm kitchen table. But I didn't. I let the rage burn like a pilot light under my ribs. The morning sun brought Emma's whisper. "Mom, can I play my clarinet here?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Here you can play until the walls dance." Her smile looked like it had been hiding for weeks. She sat up by the window, reed between her lips, fingers quick. The notes filled the house, not careful, not hushed, but full, as if she were reclaiming oxygen. Jack sat cross-legged on the floor, sketching her silhouette like a courtroom artist documenting freedom. Nancy brought pancakes to the table. "Sounds like rebellion," she said with a grin. "Sounds like home," Emma corrected. By noon, the guilt parade was back. "Stephen, this time, we're willing to forgive last night if you come by this weekend. Ethan misses his cousins, you owe him stability." I stared at the screen, baffled. Ethan, who couldn't string words yet, suddenly became the family's mouthpiece. My parents had always been fluent ventriloquists, now they'd found a new puppet. Jack peeked over my shoulder. "We don't owe them anything," he said flatly. He sounded older than 10. That afternoon, I drove the twins to see our soon-to-be rental. The realtor met us at the curb, handing me the keys for a walkthrough before the official move-in date. The house was small, yes, but it had 3 bedrooms. 3 separate rooms. Emma raced to the smallest, already calling dibs. Jack measured the sunlight in the middle room with his hands as if sketching invisible canvases. "It's enough," he said. "It's ours," I corrected. We lay on the floor of the empty living room, staring up at the ceiling. The kids whispered their plans, posters, curtains, a desk for drawings, a bulletin board for sheet music. Their voices wove a tapestry I could wrap around my shoulders. For the first time in months, I thought, we're going to be okay. But peace never lasts long in families like mine. That evening, as I was packing the trunk with clothes we'd washed at Nancy's, a car slowed outside. My father's Buick. The engine idled long enough to make my skin crawl. I stepped onto the porch. "What do you want?" He rolled down the window. His face was hard, but his eyes darted. "You're embarrassing this family. People are talking." "Let them," I said. "You've poisoned those children against us," he snapped. "No," I said, voice low, steady. "Did that when you told them they weren't as important as their cousin." His jaw worked, chewing words he couldn't spit out, then softer. "You'll regret this, Amanda." He drove away. I stood there until the taillights disappeared, until the night was just crickets and my heartbeat. When I walked back inside, Emma looked up from her clarinet case. "Are they going to try and take us back?" "Not if I can help it," I said. And for the first time, I believed my own words. At 10:03 p.m., another email from HR blinked onto my phone. "Amanda, please call me tomorrow to clarify concerns raised about your reliability. We understand family emergencies, but documentation is required." My parents weren't just trying to control where my children slept. They were trying to make sure we couldn't sleep anywhere else either. I set the phone down, tucked the kids into Nancy's air mattress, and whispered to myself, "Front door with a key. One more week, we're almost there." But the truth hummed at the back of my mind, cold and certain. People who have built their lives on control don't let go quietly. And something told me the fight had just started. Rental smelled like fresh paint and maybe, if hope has a scent, cut lemons. 3 bedrooms. I said it out loud 3 times on purpose so the words would stick. 3 bedrooms. Emma measured the smallest with her arms and declared it perfect. Jack stood in the middle room turning slow circles, a surveyor with a pencil behind his ear. "The light," he whispered, like he'd just found a friend. Nancy arrived with a trunk full of donations from nurses who loved too hard. Lamps, a comforter in a cheerful plaid, a desk that had seen better semesters. The twins and I dragged our lives up the little walkway, past a patch of dirt that would one day be a garden. Every trip from the car to the door felt like adding a rib to a body that could finally hold a heart. "House rule number 1, I said over pizza on the floor, our plates balanced on moving boxes. "We don't whisper here unless someone's sleeping." Emma lifted her slice. "Then I'm declaring it daytime forever." Jack chewed and nodded. "House rule number 2, art on every wall. Even the fridge," I teased. "Especially the fridge," he said, serious as a judge. My phone buzzed. HR. For a second the room tilted, the memory of my father's voice calling the hospital the way fear tastes metallic. I stepped into the tiny kitchen and answered. "Amanda, it's Kelly. I wanted to follow up on the concern we received." I braced. "Yes, I've reviewed your coverage logs and your charge nurse's note. You did everything by the book." Paper rustled. "We've also noted your leadership on the PEDS floor. If you're interested, we're opening an acting charge nurse slot nights through winter. Pay bump, more predictable schedules." For a heartbeat, I forgot how to speak. "Yes," I said finally and felt my spine lengthen. "Thank you. Bring the documentation we emailed. Also," her voice softened, "I'm sorry your family involved us that way." When I returned to the living room, Jack and Emma were building a skyline out of boxes. "Did we win?" Emma asked, eyes bright. "We did," I said. "And we're not done." By Saturday, we had beds cobbled from Allen wrenches and stubbornness. Emma taped her sheet music above her desk with surgical precision. Jack filled a bulletin board with foxes that thought about things. Nancy left us with a hug at the door and a key copied on her own dime. "Just in case," she said, which is what love sounds like when it's practical. Sunday morning, my phone lit up with a message from Mom. "Dinner at 5, we'd like to try again. Please bring the children, no scenes." The last 2 words were a bruise pushed with a thumb. I typed, deleted, typed. Ground rules, no shushing Emma's practice. No comments about Jack's food, no moving their belongings. Equal gifts and equal praise. If any of that fails, we leave. I hit send before courage could look around for exits. 3 dots. Then, fine. 5 o'clock. We arrived with 2 casseroles because I have learned you should never arrive at a battlefield empty-handed. Aunt Susan hugged the twins like she'd been storing the squeeze for days. Dad stood at the counter carving a roast he hadn't paid for. Mom set a bowl of green beans as if parading penance. "Thank you for coming," she said. Her voice trembled in a way that made me guard my soft parts. "Things got out of hand." "They were always in your hands," I said gently. "That's the problem." Dinner began like a ceasefire. Ethan banged a spoon and Melissa cooed, lower volume than before, eyes flicking toward me. Stephen launched into a monologue about load-bearing walls, budgets, contractors who lied, and I thought of the utmost statements in my bag, the zeros that belonged to children sitting across from me eating mashed potatoes like saints. When Emma asked, "May I practice after dinner, MS? Grant wants daily scales," Mom opened her mouth, then closed it. Of course, she said, and it sounded like the first word she'd had to teach her tongue to pronounce. Jack pushed his peas into a perfect circle. Could I have a sandwich if I try a bite? Yes, Mom said again, the word loosening. Yes, you can. Aunt Susan winked at me over her water glass. Small mercies. Real ones. Midway through the meal, I set my fork down. I found the first mountain bank statements. I said to my father, the room cooled. Stephen's knife paused midair. Dad didn't look up. We're replacing the funds. When? I asked. With what? Your fixed income, Stephen's foundation problem. I kept my voice even. There are laws around custodial accounts. I've spoken to a lawyer at the hospital whose wife does family finance. He did look up then, and I watched him remember I am a woman with a job that writes reports other adults have to sign. Don't threaten us, he said. It's not a threat, I said. It's a plan. Monthly repayment into new custodial accounts I control. A written acknowledgement of withdrawal. If you miss, we escalate. I slid a typed page across the table, bullet points neat, my signature line blank. It's this or a judge. My mother stared at the paper like it was written in a language she never bothered to learn. Richard, she whispered, just read it. Stephen laughed, the kind of laugh men deploy when cornered. You think you're the first person to Google a statute, please? Silverline renovations. Aunt Susan said sweetly, spells fraud and discovery just the same. Melissa shifted, cheeks pink. For once, she didn't have a sentence designed to make my spine cold. Dinner moved again, a clumsy animal trying to stand after a fall. After plates, Emma played, soft at first, then a scale that threaded itself through the hallway like a silver line. No one shushed her. Jack drew at the table, his pencil scratching a new fox with open eyes. Mom sat beside me. I was wrong, she said quietly, the admission navigating her mouth like a tight curve. About Ethan, about Stephen, about a lot. The words should have landed like rain in a dry season. They landed like a forecast, not a drought ending, but a pattern change. Thank you, I said. Keep being wrong in this direction. Dad was loud with dishes in the sink. Stephen took a call in the hall disguised as business, and came back using the words bridge loan and timeline like talismans. Aunt Susan gathered leftovers for us with the efficiency of a woman who knows how to pack a life in 10 minutes. We left before dessert. Boundaries are easier to defend standing up. On the porch, Mom hugged the twins and me like a woman trying to memorize shapes. Next Sunday? She asked. Maybe, I said. If things keep looking like this. We walked down the steps into twilight. Nancy's car waited at the curb. She'd insisted on being our ride until the tires of our day-to-day felt thicker. I buckled the kids in and turned my phone from silent. 2 new voicemails, one from Kelly at HR, a friendly logistics follow-up, the other from a number I didn't recognize. I played it on speaker as the car idled. MS, Harris, this is Daniel Ortiz, property manager for Willow Park Rentals. We've received some calls with concerns about your reliability and, well, about the safety of your children. We don't usually get involved in personal matters, but because your move-in date is this week, I need to discuss your file. Please call me first thing in the morning. Emma's hand found mine. Jack stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Behind us, my parents' porch light flicked on, a square of yellow in the dark. In front of us, a house key sat heavy in my pocket, a promise, yes, but suddenly also a question. Nancy put the car in drive. We'll handle it, she said. I nodded, throat dry. We will. But as we pulled away, my phone vibrated again. David this time. We should talk. I set up a college fund you never knew about. We need to coordinate custody and finances. A second bubble, just as I started to breathe. Also, I heard from your dad about the HR thing. Call me. The night pressed in thin as paper. Somewhere in the dark, a ladder leaned against a wall I hadn't seen yet. I didn't sleep. The voicemail from the property manager kept replaying in my head, a cold drumbeat, concerns about your reliability. It had my father's fingerprints all over it. Still, the part that twisted my stomach wasn't just him, it was David's text. College fund you never knew about, a second fund or another lie. At 6:30 a.m., I dialed the Willow Park office before coffee, before courage could scatter. Daniel Ortiz answered, his voice brisk like he'd already read a memo about me. Mr. Ortiz, this is Amanda Harris. You left me a message. Yes, thank you for calling promptly. Had a few anonymous calls suggesting instability in your household. Concerns about police involvement, work attendance, finances. He hesitated. We don't usually take these things seriously, but given your lease begins this week, I needed clarification. I closed my eyes, pictured my children asleep in their borrowed beds. Mr. Ortiz, I'm a full-time pediatric nurse. I have steady income, strong credit, and an employment letter I can forward right now. The police came because my parents attempted to move my children to an unsafe space without consent. The officer confirmed I had done nothing wrong. As for finances, I've saved for nearly 2 years. I can provide bank statements and pay stubs. Silence hummed across the line. Then, that's reassuring. I'll note your file accordingly. We'll still need the documentation today. You'll have it in an hour, I promised. And one more thing, please record the source of those calls. They're not anonymous to me, they're harassment. He exhaled. I understand. When I hung up, my hands shook, not from fear but from the sharp relief of hearing my own voice steady and professional while my parents tried to paint me otherwise. At the hospital, Nancy hugged me in the break room. You sound like a woman building a case file. Because I am, I said. Every text, every voicemail, if they want to fight dirty, I'll fight documented. Nancy smirked. That's my girl. At noon, David showed up at the hospital. He had the audacity to wait by the vending machines with his easy smile, as if we were still sharing a mortgage and Sunday mornings. Can we talk? He asked, hands shoved in his pockets. I folded my arms. 5 minutes. He launched into it. Your dad called me. He's worried. Said you stormed out. Police got involved. The kids are confused. The kids are clearer than they've ever been, I snapped. Cut to the point, David. He sighed, adopting his reasonable voice. Fine, the college funds. After the divorce, I set up 2 529s, automatic deposits. They're in my name for now, but my jaw tightened. In your name? It's standard, he insisted. I control the accounts, but they're earmarked for Jack and Emma. I didn't tell you because I didn't want conflict, and now with all this drama. I barked a laugh, bitter. Drama? You mean my father stealing from the twins' Utmo accounts to pay for Steven's house? Or you hiding money while I worked double shifts? He flinched. I was protecting the kids' future. By keeping me ignorant, I stepped closer. You want to help transfer control to me, full access, full transparency. Otherwise, those accounts are just another leash you think you get to hold. David shifted, guilt flickering across his face. Amanda, don't Amanda me. I've had enough men explain what my children deserve while cutting me out of the decision. If you mean what you say, show me. Otherwise, stay out of my way. I walked off before he could respond, my pulse hot in my ears. That night in the rental's kitchen with boxes still stacked like barricades, I told the twins everything edited for age but true. Grandma and Grandpa used money that belonged to you. Dad set aside other money but didn't tell me. None of it changes this. I will fight for your future with every breath. Jack's eyes were fierce. Do we have enough now? We have enough to keep going, I said. Emma leaned against me. Then that's enough. We sat there in the half-unpacked kitchen, a small army with peanut butter sandwiches, and I felt something click into place. Clarity. The next day, a letter arrived in the mailbox with my parents' neat handwriting. Inside, we want Sunday dinner to continue, but only if you agree not to bring up money again. Families forgive. Families move on. No apology, no repayment, just conditions. I folded the letter, slid it into the drawer with the bank statements, the police report, the HR emails, evidence. Mom, Emma asked, watching my face. Are we going back this Sunday? I shook my head. Not this time. Jack grinned faintly. Good, I like our house better. It doesn't smell like rules. And for once, I didn't feel like I was stealing from my children's sense of family. I was building it. By Wednesday, I had a file folder that could stand up on its own. Police incident number, HR email, the lease, pay stubs, the Utma statements with zeros that weren't accidents. I took it to legal aid on my lunch break, sat under fluorescent lights that made everybody look like bad news, and told a volunteer attorney the story I'd been trying not to make true. He listened without rushing me. Your father, as custodian, owed a fiduciary duty, he said finally, tapping the page where Silverline Renovations LLC glared up like a punchline. This is actionable. Civil, definitely. Potentially criminal, depending on your state. We can draft a demand letter, repayment plan, admission of withdrawal, transfer of control to you. If they refuse, we file. What if I don't want to blow up the bridge? I asked. What if I just want the money back? He leaned back. Bridges that steal your kids' future aren't bridges. When I left, I had a form letter in my bag and a clock in my chest. 2 weeks for response, it said. 2 weeks to decide if I'm a daughter who sues her parents. Back at the hospital, Nancy pressed a yogurt into my hand like medicine. You okay? They took the twins' money, I said. And the law thinks I'm allowed to act like that matters. It does, she said. Remember that when the guilt choir starts singing. The choir started at 6 p.m. exactly. Families don't take families to court, Mom. We said we'd replace it, Dad. This is Steven's worst week. He can't handle stress, Mom again. I answered with one message, repayment plan in writing. New custodial accounts under my control. 2 weeks. David texted next, as if he could smell movement. I'll transfer control of the 529 if you agree to a new custody schedule. I want more overnights. It's time. He attached a PDF titled Proposed Custody Framework. In a footnote, the word stability concerns blinked like a hazard light. I called him. You want more time with the kids, be a father, I said. Make dinner, show up at practice. Sign the records transfer for the pediatrician, and transfer the funds today. You don't barter their future for your convenience. That's not fair, he said. Fair is for games, I said. We're talking about children. He didn't hang up. He didn't agree. He did what men like David are trained to do. He stalled and called it prudence. The next hit came between the dishwasher and the twins' homework. A number I didn't recognize, a debt collector with a script. Is this Amanda Harris? Our records show a balance of $3,218 on a Helios credit account opened last year. I closed all joint cards in the divorce, I said. This one lists you as authorized user, she chimed. Authorized user, the prettiest phrase for a trap. David and his liquidity. The dates lined up neatly with his rooftop sunsets and my second shifts. Send me the paperwork, I said, throat dry. When I hung up, I leaned on the counter until my knuckles went white. Jack looked up from his math worksheet and cocked his head. Earthquake, he asked. Just paperwork, I said, and tried to make my smile look less like baring teeth. At 9, I met Nancy's eyes over a mountain of laundry and said, Is it always like this, when you decide to stop being a doormat? Worse for a while, she said. Then better than you can picture. I wanted to ask when the better shows up. Instead, I folded socks with the focus of a woman trying to win something nobody could name. Thursday morning brought a different kind of blow. Marissa, from the PED's floor, from potlucks and shared scrubs and the kind of confidences that feel mutual until you discover they were one way, posted a cheery story on Instagram of her Pilates class. In the far mirror, Melissa stood 2 reformers down, laughing, a tag #momfriends. 5 minutes later, a DM from Melissa, heard you're threatening legal action. Family meeting might be wiser than lawyers. Also, watch your friends. Screenshots get around. A screenshot followed, my late night text to Marissa last week. Sometimes I want to burn the whole thing down. Underneath Melissa's caption, such violent language, Amanda, be careful who you tell. I put the phone down like it could bite. My chest hurt, a hot, humiliating ache. Betrayal has a smaller sting when you're expecting it. I hadn't been. Nancy saw my face and didn't ask questions. She just put coffee in my hand and said, So now we know who not to save in a fire. I blocked 2 numbers. I didn't unblock my temper. By afternoon, Daniel Ortiz at Willow Park called. Everything's in order, he said. DocuSign finalized. Keys at 4, ignore the noise. At 4, the keys were cold and heavy and honest in my palm. The twins tapped them against their teeth like they were checking authenticity. Real, Emma pronounced. We celebrated with cheap tacos and a playlist that made the walls shake politely. Emma practiced in the doorway until the scale ran clean. Jack hung his foxes. I sent the demand letter by certified mail and didn't throw up. At 9, while I was labeling a bin winter because naming things is how I practice control, there was a knock. Not polite. Rhythmic. Official. Nancy opened the door halfway. A woman stood there in a navy blazer with a folder hugged to her chest, a badge on a lanyard. Behind her, a second person, young, tired, carrying a soft-sided briefcase. Ms. Harris, the woman asked, peering past Nancy into our still unpacked living room. Yes, I said, stepping forward. I'm Tasha Klein, Family Services, she said. We received a report of concerns regarding the welfare of Jack and Emma. We're required to conduct a home visit. Emma froze. Jack's pencil stopped midline. Nancy's hand found the edge of the door like it was a cliff. I heard my own voice, calm and clinical, the one I use with terrified parents who think I might judge them. Of course, I said. Come in. Tasha glanced at her clipboard. It says here there was police involvement last week and instability regarding housing. There was, I said. The officer cleared us to leave an unsafe situation. We signed a lease. The kids' rooms are set up. You can see them. The younger worker, Evan, his badge said, looked at the twins and tried a smile. Mind if we take a tour? Emma stood. My room is the smallest, she said, cheeks flushing, but it's mine. They walked the rooms. Emma's sheet music on the wall, Jack's drawings, the toothbrushes lined like soldiers in the bathroom. Evan crouched by Jack's inhaler on the nightstand. This is the rescue one. Albuterol, Jack nodded, all business. I know how to use the spacer. In the kitchen, Tasha jotted notes while Nancy pointed at the calendar school schedules, my shifts, a sticky note labeled Aunt Susan, pick up Thursday. The fridge wore the twins' art like armor. Ms. Harris, Tasha said finally, do you have any support? Yes, I said. I nodded at Nancy. Aunt Susan, my unit, my own spine. Something softened around Tasha's eyes. Okay, she said. We still have to follow up with the reporting party. You do that. Nancy said brightly. Tell him his basement fails every code I know. Tasha didn't smile exactly, but she didn't not smile either. She closed the folder. We'll be in touch. When the door shut, Emma let out a breath that wobbled. Jack leaned into me like a boy who finally trusts the ground. My phone buzzed on the counter. A new email from David, transferring the 529 control tonight. Also, my lawyer will reach out about custody modifications. I'm not the enemy here. Under that, a new message from an unknown number. You will regret this. Family court eats people like you. No signature, but I could hear my father's cadence in its cowardice. I took the keys out of my pocket and set them on the table, metal clinking on wood, a sound that felt like punctuation. I looked at my children, at the art, at the calendar that finally only told our time. Then I picked up my phone and started a new email. Kelly, about that charge nurse position. I'm in, and I'll need nights that let me drive my kids to school. I hit send. The house was quiet in the way houses are when they're listening. Somewhere across town, a man who calls himself my father was dialing a new number. Somewhere else, a man who used to be my husband was drafting a motion with someone who says best interest, like a chess term. And here, under our roof, two children slid their drawers shut and turned off their lamps without waiting for permission.